In the quiet town of Pinebridge, where life moved at a steady and unremarkable pace, a sudden shift was about to unravel. On a routine patrol one late afternoon, Officer Patricius found herself acutely aware of the stillness that usually enveloped the streets. It was during this typical day that her observant nature would spark a series of events that revealed hidden dangers and ignited a quest for justice. As she passed the corner store, her gaze fell upon a small figure sitting forlornly on a worn curb. It was a young boy, no older than 8, who hugged his knees tightly and stared down at the ground beneath him, his little frame shaking slightly. Patricius noticed the shimmering tears in his eyes, reflecting a world of hurt. Instinctively, she sensed that something was terribly wrong. With a heart full of concern, Patricius knelt beside him. The weight of her badge momentarily lifted as she focused solely on the child. She gently asked, "Are you all right?" The boy looked up at her, his expression a mix of fear and relief. There was a tremor in his lips as he whispered 3 words that would reverberate profoundly in Patricius's mind. "Please help me." Those 3 words propelled Patricius into action. The urgency of the moment swallowed any hesitation she might have felt. Reaching for her radio, she called out, "Dispatch, this is Officer Patricius. I need immediate backup." The gravity of the situation hung heavy in the air as she reassured the boy, trying to instill some calm amidst his visible terror. When Officer Alvarez, her colleague, arrived on the scene, Patricius wasted no time explaining the situation. With a mix of protective instinct and professional urgency, she relayed to Alvarez that the child, whom they would later learn was named Ebony, was alone without any guardian in sight, his plea indicating an imminent danger. Alvarez approached Ebony with a softness that contrasted sharply with the tense atmosphere. "What's your name, buddy?" he asked gently, eliciting a timid response from the boy. "Ebony," he said, his voice still shaky. Despite his effort to communicate, he offered no further details. Seeking to gather information, Patricius took out her phone, snapping a quick picture of Ebony and sending it to the precinct, hoping it might help locate any family or guardians who might be searching for him. Each second felt like an eternity as they awaited more information. Ebony clutched a small bag that contained only a few wrinkled clothes, an additional reminder of his precarious situation. Just then, an older woman from the neighborhood stumbled upon the scene. Drawn by the patrol cars, she recognized Ebony and approached them with concern. "He's an orphan," she explained sadly, her voice heavy with sorrow. "He's been wandering between places ever since his last foster home ended. He has no family, no one to look out for him." Patricius and Alvarez exchanged troubled glances. It was a heart-wrenching realization that this young boy, no more than a child himself, was so alone in the world. With newfound determination, they guided Ebony gently toward the squad car, prioritizing his safety above all else. However, the drive to the Pinebridge police station was filled with silence, interrupted only by the occasional nervous breath from the child. Officer Alvarez ventured to inquire if anyone had hurt him, but Ebony remained silent, his gaze fixed out the window as if grappling with memories he couldn't voice. Upon arriving at the police department, Patricius pledged to spread the word about the boy, determined to uncover the details of his past. She knew that someone had to know something about Ebony, whether it be a relative or a former foster caregiver. Over the following days, tips trickled in, ranging from misguided assumptions to glimmers of hope that Ebony had relatives in a neighboring city. A turning point came when a call originated from a wealthy neighborhood known as Oakwood Estates. The voice on the other end claimed to recognize the little boy from a local community forum and hinted at a potential link to a particular property in the area. Intrigued yet cautious, Patricius and Alvarez promptly made their way to Oakwood Estates, eager to uncover the truth. As they drove through the streets lined with stately mansions, Ebony's reaction was visceral. His eyes widened as the vehicle rounded a corner, revealing a strikingly beautiful mansion set beside high hedges. Without knowing why, he gripped the seat with such fervor that Alvarez noticed the whiteness of his knuckles. "Guess this is where we need to look," Patricius whispered to Alvarez, sensing the emotional weight of the moment. Parking outside the mansion's ornate gate, they couldn't find any nameplate or sign indicating ownership. Officer Alvarez pressed the call button at the gate, and a few moments later, a middle-aged man appeared, dressed in an expensive suit that screamed affluence and privilege. His expression was tinged with annoyance as he calmly asked, "Officers, may I ask what brings you here?" Patricius introduced herself and briefly explained that they were investigating a missing child case, asking if he recognized Ebony. The man glanced at the boy with thinly veiled indifference, shaking his head and shrugging dismissively. Patricius felt an unease wash over her at the man's comportment, and Ebony, still sitting in the car, seemed to shrink into himself as he peered nervously at the mansion. Not one to back down easily, Alvarez inquired if they might take a look around the property. "You have no warrant," the man retorted, crossing his arms defiantly. Legally, they were limited in their ability to demand a search without probable cause, but Patricius felt a rising tide of urgency. Ebony's visible agitation gave her enough reason to press for answers. She laid out Ebony's circumstances in front of the man, detailing how he had been found trembling in the street and had recognized this property. Still, the man attempted to shut them down, but it was at that very moment that Ebony uttered a statement that made everyone freeze. "There are others." Patricius's heart raced. The implication was clear. If there were others, the gravity of the situation multiplied exponentially. Officer Alvarez quickly initiated a call over the radio. "This is Officer Patricius requesting additional units at Oakwood Estates. Address 324, Willow Drive. Possible minors at risk." The man began to protest, but Alvarez stepped forward, looking at the man with a seriousness that left little room for argument. They were not leaving the area. When backup finally arrived, they were able to secure the man, identified as Trent Callister, for questioning on suspicion of his involvement in the possible exploitation of children. Ebony remained with Alvarez, trembling in silence, while Patricius and several officers began asking pointed questions of Callister. But he refused to cooperate, only offering curt denials such as, "You're making a mistake." However, Ebony's fearful energy and his responses to certain areas within the mansion hinted at something dark and sinister lurking beneath the surface. Establishing probable cause through Ebony's testimony and Callister's suspicious behavior, the officers initiated a careful search of the premises. In the basement, a heavy locked door drew their attention. The air inside hung thick with mustiness, and dread intensified as they pried it open. Inside, they discovered a small, dark chamber lit only by a flickering bulb, and huddled on a grimy cot was another child, pale-faced and visibly shaking with fear. Patricius knelt beside the trembling boy, heart shattered, as she called for medical assistance over her radio. The sight made her stomach churn. The child looked malnourished, wearing clothes far too small for his frame. Without hesitation, Alvarez hurried to help him stand. Despite their adventure through chaos, questions flooded from the officers, but the rescued boy was too frightened to speak. They promptly guided him upstairs where paramedics awaited. News traveled rapidly throughout Pinebridge that the upscale mansion had been the site of suspected child exploitation. Shockwaves reverberated through the community, as residents realized that Oakwood Estates, known for its wealth and supposed safety, had been hiding horrors behind its manicured hedges. As the investigation unfurled, police uncovered scattered evidence indicating that children, often runaways or orphans, had been trafficked for illicit purposes. The entire police force worked tirelessly, gathering documents, interviewing potential witnesses, and piecing together the events leading up to this pivotal moment. Callister was formally arrested and taken into custody, while the rescued children, including Ebony, were placed under the protective care of the Pinebridge Family Services Unit. The priority was finding safer foster homes during the ongoing investigation. Officer Patricius visited Ebony at the Social Services office, where the small boy was provided with a warm bed and new clothes. As guilt gnawed at her, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had found him just in time to uncover a grim truth. Had Ebony not summoned the courage to utter those 3 words, "Please help me," and later mention the existence of others, how many more children might have continued to suffer in silence? The residents of Pinebridge demanded answers. Local news outlets gathered outside the police station, cameras flashing and reporters clamoring for details. Although Officer Patricius could not disclose specifics due to the nature of the investigation, she implored community members during an interview to remain vigilant. "You may never truly know what's happening next door," she cautioned, emphasizing the importance of reporting any suspicious activity. The day of Callister's arraignment arrived, and crowds suddenly flocked to the courthouse, some holding signs demanding justice for the children, while others expressed support for Ebony and his new friend who turned out to be just 6 years old. Pinebridge social workers confirmed that at least 2 other children who had once resided at the mansion had vanished prior to the police raid, adding a chilling layer to the community's growing resolve to prevent such tragedies from happening again. Meanwhile, Patricius worked closely with Alvarez, ensuring Ebony's well-being during this tumultuous time. Discussions began about arranging for him to find a new foster family once the investigation concluded. Remarkably resilient, Ebony exhibited a spark of determination and strength despite the trauma he had suffered. Day by day, he began to trust again, sometimes even smiling shyly when officers offered him a juice box or asked about his favorite cartoons. In the aftermath of the investigation, the Pinebridge community learned of Ebony's invaluable role in exposing the mansion's dark secret. Many reached out, sending him letters of hope, small gifts, and even offers of adoption. One family in town, known for fostering children in need, stepped forward, willing to provide him with a loving home. While a challenging road of healing lay ahead, the weight of fear and isolation lifted from Ebony's shoulders. As weeks turned into months, the evidence against Callister mounted. Documents seized from the mansion unveiled a web of illegal trafficking activities. Under escalating pressure, Callister reluctantly confessed to luring children with nowhere else to go but refused to name any accomplices. The case expanded beyond the borders of Pinebridge. Authorities remained relentlessly focused on dismantling the entire trafficking network, determined to put an end to the atrocities faced by so many vulnerable children. For Ebony, the nightmares gradually lessened as he settled into his new foster home. With a kind foster mother who encouraged him to see a child psychologist, he began the delicate process of relearning how to feel safe. During therapy sessions, Ebony opened up about his feelings, the sorrow intertwined with fear, longing for a stable family amid the memories that haunted him. Through it all, he displayed a quiet strength that resonated deeply with Officer Patricius, reminding her of the very reason she had become a police officer, to protect and safeguard the lives of the vulnerable. One quiet afternoon, Patricius eagerly visited Ebony at his new foster home, where the sweet scent of homemade cookies welcomed her. With excitement in his eyes, he proudly showed her bright drawings he had been working on, illustrations of cozy houses, sunny flowers, and happy faces. In one corner of a picture, Ebony had drawn a small figure in a blue uniform standing protectively beside a smaller boy. Tears welled up in Patricius's eyes as she beheld the simple depiction of a protector, understanding all too well the significance of that figure. As media coverage of the case prompted widespread reforms throughout Pinebridge, efforts intensified for better child welfare checks and additional resources for local shelters. The town's residents committed themselves to organizing charity drives and forming volunteer groups aimed at keeping an eye on children lacking stable homes. There were training sessions implemented for teachers and community members to recognize potential warning signs of trafficking or abuse. The legacy left behind by Ebony's courage served as a catalyst for positive change, igniting a renewed sense of unity among the townsfolk. When the anticipated day of Callister's trial finally arrived, it marked a critical moment of closure for the community. While Ebony wasn't required to testify in open court owing to laws protecting minors, his recorded testimony would play a pivotal role in the prosecution's argument. Officer Patricius, Alvarez, and numerous other officers delivered statements regarding the rescue operation and the immediate care provided to the young boys. The jury listened attentively, captivated by the gravity of the circumstances. After deliberation, they returned with a resounding guilty verdict on multiple counts, including child trafficking and exploitation. The sentencing for Callister was severe. He would face a lengthy prison term, which sent ripples of relief throughout the community. Pinebridge erupted in a collective sigh of relief, grateful that the justice system had worked in their favor. Yet, Everyone knew that true healing, especially for victims like Ebony, would necessitate time and gradual understanding. As weeks rolled by following the verdict, the community remained ever watchful, acutely aware that the shadows of child abuse could not be dispelled by a single arrest. In the months that followed, Officer Alvarez spearheaded a program dedicated to connecting at-risk children with mentors. Meanwhile, Patricius dedicated herself to ongoing training in child protection, ensuring that the haunting scenes in that mansion would never repeat themselves. Social workers intensified their screening processes for prospective foster families, implementing rigorous safeguards against exploitation. Ladies and gentlemen, Patricius would often remind the community, "We must come together to protect our children, to ensure that they have safe havens and loving homes." As the story in Pinebridge achieved a conclusion, it stood as testimony to the power of perseverance, compassion, and unwavering vigilance. A new chapter was now unfolding for the townspeople, one where they could form a united front to ensure that every child, including Ebony, had the opportunity to flourish in a world free from fear. Time and growth would shape the narrative from tragedy to resilience, while the community would remain forever changed, inspired to endure in their commitment to safeguarding the innocence of youth. In the end, it wasn't just a story of a young boy who asked for help. It was a powerful reminder that change often begins with a single act of bravery. As Pinebridge transitioned from darkness to light, countless lives would forever be touched, resonating with the universal truth that every child's voice deserves to be heard. So, let us remember, may every story shared be a step toward creating a safer and more compassionate world for every child, forever. This expanded version captures the essence of the narrative while elaborating on the storyline and characters, extending it to approximately 2,000 words. Let me know if you need any further assistance or adjustments.